and welcome to Dialogue. Billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk has agreed to resign as CEO of Twitter as soon as he finds, in his words, someone foolish enough to take the job. Over 57% of Twitter users had voted in an online poll for Musk to step down. What explains the negative feedback from users? Who will be Musk's successor? And what does this mean for the future of the popular social media app? To help us answer these questions and more, I'm joined today by Professor Gong from the University of International Business and Economics, and Mario Cavolo, non-resident senior fellow at Center for China and Globalization, and Harvey Dzodin, former vice president at ABC TV network. That's our topic. I'm Xu Xindong. Welcome to the discussion, gentlemen. John, I will start with you. So now we have the polling results. More than 57% of the Twitter users basically saying that Elon Musk is not qualified to be the CEO of Twitter. Do you agree?
Well, if it's a capacity issue, I tend to disagree. Actually, I don't think a CEO position has too much to do with his capability in a particular industry or experience in a particular industry. I think his track record has shown that he is able to pull it off in every CEO position he has done in the past. Across a couple of companies. So I think he's a very capable man. But in terms of the public sentiment towards him, I totally agree that he's not very popular at this point. The vote has shown that people don't like him to be the CEO. But we also emphasize that this is probably also something that he has already decided. He's just using this as a sort of a social drama to endorse his already thought about decision. He's already talked about this.
Mm-hmm. Well, Harvey, Elon Musk is a genius. He's hugely successful with Tesla, with SpaceX. But Twitter as a social media platform is very different business. This is about opinions. People have different opinions. People agree or disagree with each other. And also conspiracy theories. It's rife in the social media. It's difficult to manage in a sense.
I can't figure this one out. I think that Elon Musk wanted a toy. He was bored with Tesla. He was bored with the Boring Company. He was bored with SpaceX. So I think he wanted a toy, and the toy is Twitter, because it's kind of like the public square, not only of America, but of the whole world, actually. And so he thought he's going to be the master of the universe, and he would run this thing. And he didn't think about how complicated it is, that there's so many competing policy considerations. There's so many competing advertising considerations. There's so many problems where you don't have enough guide rails, so that you have racism and hate speech, and you have crazy people advocating all kinds of antisocial and illegal things. And I think, quite frankly, he's like Donald Trump. He should have quit before he was when he was ahead, because he's gotten himself into a big mess now, and I don't think he's going to get out of it. Look, by going here to try to take this company private and run it, he's in a way run the gem of his empire, Tesla, into the ground. It's lost 60% this year. That's even lagging the S&P by 35%. It's got a market cap of nearly $500 billion. And he's not serving the shareholders of that public company very well. There's securities laws. And so I'm really worried. And I think, yes, he'll probably step back from running this. But if he's anything like he's been before, and if he's anything like his buddy Donald Trump, would you want to be the person who he appoints? And how many minutes is that person going to stay in the job?
This confident. Well, John, speaking of, he mentioning that his resignation or his intention to resign from this position. But is there anyone to replace him, anyone probably more capable or more suitable to run such kinds of business to replace him?
Well, I haven't read any names being mentioned at this point. I would be guessing that he's probably looking for a pro, somebody in the social media business for some time, capable executive. I mean, typical American way of doing things is that they will form a executive search committee, and there'll be headhunters out there making phone calls, approaching a few people, and then we start from there. It's going to be some outsider. I think it's highly unlikely that he will promote something from within Twitter. He's already fired enough of people over there, and I don't know if he, if he would trust anybody who have been working with Twitter for some time. So my guess is that there will be an outsider coming in, and that's usually what people do to try to turn around a company. You hire somebody from outside.
Actually, John, I disagree with you if I can butt in here, because I think anybody from the outside would be crazy to take a job with this man, just like anybody would have been crazy to take a job with Trump, because there was no job security. And you're dealing with somebody who, to be kind, is mercurial, who changes his mind on a whim. But there have been a couple names that have been mentioned, actually. And one is a former Twitter, Meta, and Microsoft executive called Sriram Krishnan. And there's another person, a podcaster and investor named David Sachs. And like Musk, he was a member of what they call the PayPal Mafia. And these are guys who got out from the .com bust and made a lot of money, actually, early on through PayPal and other things.
Well, money talks. I don't know. Everything is for sale at some point, I guess. There will be people taking on this job, no matter how nasty this job is, as long as there's an adequate package provided to him. So I think it's going to be a huge challenge in my view. Twitter is not doing so well, for the last few months. It's also getting more of into a challenging environment. And also, in consideration of the macro economy in the United States right now. So I think the next few months will be a real challenge for this company. But again, I would say that if the price is right, there'll be somebody taking on this job, no matter how nasty a job it is.
But let's not worry about the financial situation. Probably, this is billionaire doesn't care about billions of loss of dollars. And of course, somebody else, as long as there's enough money, they will take the job. But then if you shift away a little bit from here, when Musk took over Twitter, Mario, he talked about the freedom of speech, speech freedom, or true freedom of speech. He reinstalled some big names, including Donald Trump, of course, very controversial move over there. But then he took some other steps, for example, suspension for the accounts of a few journalists from traditional media, New York Times, Washington Post, etc. What do you make of his defense of freedom of speech here?
Well, when we think right now about Elon Musk's defense of freedom of speech, I immediately think of the nature of freedom of speech that he's talking about is this new Western American neoliberal freedom of speech, which is not freedom of speech at all. What it is a delusional kind of freedom of speech that's rooted in the idea that freedom of speech now has been weaponized and politicized. There's no such thing as freedom of speech. If you don't believe me, let's just go back to Walter Cronkite in the United States, was back in the 70s when I was growing up. I mean, there was decency and civility in the rules and policies and laws of the society. And so now, today, freedom of speech means, no, we don't need to follow decency and civility in society. Freedom of speech means we have the freedom to speak rudely and derogatorily and in a way that's abusive and harassing. And I have to say, that I've come to believe that the lawmakers of the United States and the executives of the United States, all these people in charge of the plutocracy, are doing this on purpose. Okay, they've weaponized freedom of speech to enable people, and I've got some examples in mind, which I'll talk about later, to enable people to use their freedom of speech to not be required to be civil, to not be required to be decent. And thank God, Chinese society in public speech and social media requires you to be civil, still requires you to be civil and decent, doesn't allow anonymous accounts, which give you the freedom, the false freedom, to be able to, quote, have your precious American freedom of speech, which just means the freedom to harass and abuse and lie right on the skirt of the law, to disrupt and destabilize what needs to be safe, stable society with well-being for families and households. And we don't have that. I think it's happening. It's being done on purpose. I do. And I don't know what else to say about it.
Harvey, do American people identify with Elon Musk's freedom of speech concept definition here?
Well, first I have to say, from a constitutional law point of view, when you talk about freedom of speech, the Constitution talks about government not making any rules that abridge freedom of speech. And so Twitter now, it's a private and it's an unregulated company. So technically, there is no First Amendment right here. But I think you have different, in America, the problem with America today is there's so many tribes. People are in so many different silos that there are a lot of people who like Elon Musk. They like the fact he's a libertarian. He doesn't like government. He does promote free speech, even if it's speech that we don't want to hear, even if it's speech that's harmful. So there are those people. But there are other people who think there need to be guardrails, that if you're in a public space, that you have to be judged and you have to run your business with certain rules. And those rules include some degree of civility. It includes talking about most things, but not talking about things that might be to overturn the government by force or to promote child pornography or pedophiles or things like that. So we're at the crossroads of private and public. And I think there's always been this debate in American society about libertarians, and we have a couple in the Congress, and certainly Elon Musk is one, who think that basically anything goes, and those who don't. And the reason that Elon Musk is in so much trouble today, and that even though he's a billionaire, he still has to pay back that $44 billion purchase price. And some of that is loaned money. And he's selling a lot of stock in order to pay the payments. It's still, at the end of the day, he has put himself in the center of the debate. And I don't think the poor man realized, as rich as he is and as smart as he is, that he was biting off more than he could chew, because this is really at the center of what Mario talked about and the center of what's going on in America today.
Well, Mario, let's go back a little bit about the freedom of speech issue here. Of course, related to that is a privacy issue, seems to be at least his Elon jet, the information about his private jet. Those few journalists basically providing available links to the whereabouts of his private jets. He's not happy with that, and he suspended those journalists for 1 week, and then reinstalled some of them, and leaving some others probably for more days off there. It's very controversial, very controversial, I would say, because people in general have questions about suspending the accounts of traditional media journalists. What do you make of that?
Well, we are right in the same category of pushing and weaponizing the idea of free speech, pushing and weaponizing the idea of privacy. Oh, I'm not I'm not skirting your privacy, really. I'm not invading your privacy. Well, no, yes, you are invading my privacy. And in invading my privacy, okay, that's a bridge too far. You know, I always say in Chinese, we have the phrase, 过分了. You know, you're 过分了. This is over the line. Okay, this is over the line. And imagine that you are a person, they talk about celebrities who can't go anywhere, right? Because they have no privacy. Everywhere they go, paparazzi are constantly hounding them, and fans are constantly hounding them, so they have no privacy. Should this be legally allowed and encouraged? And should tools be allowed to be created that actively do this to disrupt the life of private citizens? And in today's environment, in today's world environment, especially in the West, which is such a violent society, you know, it's so safe and wonderful here in China. It's so violent and unsafe relatively in the West. And so should we have our lives allowed to be put in danger? That's a legitimate concern with, in the United States, 300 million handguns floating around, you know? So I'm back to it again, Qinduo. They're doing this stuff on purpose. They're taking you right to the edge of the cliff on freedom of speech and right to the edge of privacy to ruin your life. And they're doing it on purpose. And I'm trying to figure out what the agenda is with all this.
Mm-hmm. So Harvey, basically that's a fight between Elon Musk and those journalists, you know, some of the Twitter users over there who disagree with him in many issues probably. But the thing is, like, you know, that creates a lot of difficulty for him to manage. You know, usually as a CEO, probably you don't want to tweet and you don't want to engage in particular personal fights, something personal to fight with other people there.
Well, I mean, I think this is a problem because the situation here, it's unlegislated, which is probably the way Elon Musk likes it. But there's problems because you have a situation here where many people are participating and it affects many people's lives. It affects the way the country is run. It affects the way his company, a private company, is run. And maybe there's some kind of a social responsibility. So I suspect the next time Elon Musk is called before Congress, as he will be on one or more of the things he's involved in, whether it's space travel or this, or the boring company that's not fulfilling its promises to municipalities in America, that this issue is going to come up. So we see a problem here that needs to be addressed. It's too important to leave it alone unless there are other competing media that are equally strong. There are other media that are there, like Mastodon, but they're not like Twitter. So you've got a vacuum here and somebody's got to fill it. So I think that Twitter was forced to have this advisory group. They call it the Trust and Safety Council, and it had 100 independent civil, human rights, and other kinds of people on it who looked at Twitter and its content and its rules from a pro-social perspective. I think they need that if they want to get out of trouble. And I can predict that if they don't go back to something like that, they're going to have the Congress there, if it's capable of doing anything in a divided Congress, trying to legislate some boundaries here if the company won't do it themselves.
Harvey, I don't quite remember if it was part of the Trust and Safety Council or another part of Twitter that was part of their enforcement laws, where the organization that they appointed to partner with was the Weapons and Defense Contractor funded ASPI, Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which has been, you know, rabidly anti-China, rabidly anti many issues. And weren't they part of that trust council or some other aspect?
Well, I think whether they, you know, they might have made a mistake in having those kinds of people on, and they need to have rules and they need to have this reviewed. So I think if Musk were smart, he would get some smart people to put together a model and to vet the people who are on this, because it's clear he can't do this himself. And he's trying to do this himself. I used to work for Jimmy Carter. The problem with Jimmy Carter was he was a micromanager. And so he couldn't get a lot of things done that should have been done by delegation. And Musk has the same problem here. And if he doesn't delegate, and if he doesn't act responsibly, he's going to lose his $44 billion investment, and he's going to lose what's left of his reputation, and he's going to lose the value of the other companies he's owned. Like I said, that one of the other companies that he owns, the Twitter, I'm sorry, Tesla, it's down 60% this year. Tesla is down 60% this year. And that's because Elon Musk is spreading himself too thin. He can't do it all, just like Jimmy Carter couldn't do it all.
Well, Mario, do you agree with the point that Harvey mentioned? And that's probably some business people have also mentioned about, for example, Tesla. The stock is down almost 60% this year, partly because of let's say distraction they created with Twitter. So is that some part of the pressure for him probably to step down or to distance away a little more probably from Twitter? And also he complained about he has too much on his plate.
When I think about this, I noticed earlier what Harvey had said about Elon Musk having bitten off more than he could chew. I wrote the exact same phrase down in my notes. However, I'd like to point out that, in fact, let's remember, he realized it. He realized he had bitten off more than he could chew. And if you recall, he tried to get out of it, right? He tried to back out. He spent 6 months trying to back out. So I have a funny feeling what happened, he did that tweet where he said he was going to buy Twitter for $44 billion, and somehow it ended up being a very, very legally binding tweet that he did, and his lawyers couldn't get him out of it. He knew he bit off more than he could chew. He did his best to get out of it. Enormous amount of damage being done here. Enormous amount of damage being done here to his companies, obviously, but also enormous amount of damage being done to an already damaged and toxic social media landscape in the West. This is also the problem. And it's just getting worse and worse. And Musk in this position is not accomplishing anything. He's not fixing it. He's not solving it. Did he even expect that they would vote to take him out? Was that what he was hoping for? I mean, who knows? This is really a sitcom, like All in the Family and so many others. Back in the 70s, I'm thinking of all these ridiculous, comedy sitcoms. That's what this whole thing seems like. It's not real.
But Marco, I think this is not so much a sitcom as a tragic comedy, because there's so much at stake here. And I think that it's pretty sure that Musk is going to step down from being CEO, but he's going to still own the place 100%. And is he going to be willing to step back enough and say, I'm going to hire somebody and let them run this the way it should be run? I don't see that in him. I really worry about this. And I worry about what it's doing to discourse like you do in America. And it's not only America, it's America and beyond.
If Twitter, let's say this, and I want to know if everybody agrees with this. If Twitter crashes and burns tomorrow, there will be no harm and probably benefit to American society. And if all of American mainstream media now was canceled, there would be no harm and probably benefit to American society.
So, Mario, you are speaking about let's say the illness of social media part. I would say, obviously, there's a good part to social media, easier flow, freer flow of information, for people to meet each other across the world. That's obviously part of the benefits of there. But sure. I mean, you are pointing about the the seriousness of the problems with the social media.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. And I love the idea that because of the Twitter feed, that it's an efficient place that I can go to gather up. And for example, just in the research that I do about geopolitical topics, and all of us here, wow, what an amazing thing to have a thread where you can go through and so quickly gather up so much fantastic specific knowledge from experts and be able to do that amount of research before and get that information from many respected experts at your fingertips. You'd have to go to the university library and spend days, right? Checking books out from the librarian or looking through film, looking through fish discs of newspapers and computers. I mean, so yes, thank you, Chingduo, for pointing that out. The problem is the swamp, the cesspool that we have to tolerate along the way in that thread to be able to get all that great golden information which makes our lives better. Absolutely.
Could I jump in here for a second? I think what's very important to discuss is that when it comes to the internet, and with so many people on the internet for so much of the day in and day out, and getting most of their information from the internet, you have a continuum from America, where there's virtually no regulation, to China, where there's a lot of regulation. I've been privileged to speak at the World Internet Conference in Wuzhen. And I think China's internet is very well regulated, in some respects, maybe a little too much regulated, but there's a high degree of order there. But you look at America's internet, it's like the Wild West. And I think that it's causing all of the problems that we are going through today, if not all of them, many of them, including what happened on January 6, 2021, with the American government almost being overthrown by Donald Trump and his followers. You need to have guide rails. We don't have that in America. This is a wake-up call. Elon Musk is a wake-up call for what's needed in America, to have some rules to keep people within the boundaries.
Well, with that, we come to the end of today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Xinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.